That day still burns in my memory like a picture that refuses to fade. The moment she stood there, breaking quietly while the world pretended not to notice, and I still walked away. Back then, I didn't understand that leaving someone isn't just an action. It's an earthquake inside the heart you leave behind. People used to call her the weak, awkward, bullied girl, someone who blended into background, someone who apologized even when she breathed too loudly. But the truth no one knew was that she carried a heart big enough to destroy itself for someone she cared about. And now, in this strange twist of fate, this loop of time or second chance, or whatever miracle I've been thrown into, she stood right in front of me again. Same hallway, same moment, same trembling eyes begging for one thing I never gave her. Please don't go. I thought I walked away from responsibility that day. But the truth was simpler, uglier. I walked away from her pain because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know she would die one day trying to save her crush. I didn't know her kindness would become the reason she wouldn't make it home. When the news flashed on my phone, it was just a tiny notification, small enough to ignore, except for the name that punched the air out of my lungs. People die every day, I told myself. But this wasn't people. This was the girl who used to send awkward little messages she'd rewrite 100 times before pressing send. The girl who used to glance at me from across the room, then pretend she wasn't looking. The girl whose smile always stopped halfway like she didn't believe she deserved to finish it. They say regret happens in 1 second. But for me, that 1 second stretched into a year. She never asked me for anything. Not love, not attention, just one simple thing. Please don't leave. And even then, I didn't stay. Not for a reason. Maybe for too many reasons I didn't understand. But the strangest moment came a night after I heard she died. I slept, and when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my room. I was back in those days, back in my younger body, my younger world, standing in the exact same school corridor that always looked sad even in sunlight. I thought I was dreaming, until I heard her voice behind me, that same small, shaking tone, that same fear, that same hope. Please don't leave. My entire body froze. For 1 second, I forgot everything. Forgot that I was a grown mind in a teenager's world. Forgot how time was supposed to work. Forgot reality itself. All I knew was pain, and the fact that I had been given something impossible. Not the chance to bring someone back from the dead, but the chance to stop them from dying in the first place. She looked exactly the same. The oversized gray hoodie she always hid inside, the sleeves pulled over her trembling fingers, the quiet redness on her cheeks that was not just shyness, but fear blended with hope. People called her invisible, but in that moment she looked like a universe no one bothered to explore. She had always seen everything, heard everything, felt everything, while the world pretended she wasn't even there. Dying for her crush wasn't foolishness. It was proof that her heart was too pure for cruelty around her. And now she was standing in front of me again, alive, fragile, hoping for something as small as a person who wouldn't walk away. In that moment, I knew, this time I wouldn't leave. But saying that was easier than living it, because being thrown back in time doesn't erase who you become. My mind was older now, heavier with guilt, sharper with understanding. I wasn't the clueless boy who walked away the first time. I was someone who had witnessed the end of her story and was now standing at the beginning again. And beginnings are terrifying when you already know how the ending feels. The first thing I realized after deciding I wouldn't leave was that staying wasn't simple. Staying meant stepping into the same cruel world she had walked through alone the first time. Staying meant standing between her and the people who crushed her joy for sport. Staying meant being brave in ways I hadn't been before. And as I stood there, looking at her small, uncertain face, a strange heaviness settled on my chest. She wasn't just asking me to stay in that moment. She was asking me to stay for every moment after, for every humiliation, every whisper, every shove. She didn't need a hero. She just needed someone who wouldn't vanish when things got ugly. Someone who would say, "I'm here," and actually mean it. She stared at me like she already expected disappointment, like years of being ignored had taught her not to hope too loudly. And the sad part was, she wasn't wrong. The old me had let her down, not just by walking away that day, but by living my life in a way that never even noticed hers. I had been part of the crowd that saw her pain, but pretended it was a background detail. The guilt of remembering how she died only made the air around me tighter. I wanted to reach out and touch her shoulder, say something simple like, "It's okay," but I didn't trust my voice, not when it carried the weight of a future she didn't know and a grief she hadn't lived yet. The hallway around us felt different this time, like time itself was holding its breath. Students passed by without knowing that this moment was a hinge on which two lives turned. She flinched every time someone brushed past her, like she was used to shrinking, used to disappearing to make space for the world. Her body language told 1,000 stories she never said out loud. I wondered how many times she had walked this hallway praying no one noticed her. How many times she walked faster just to escape whispers behind her. How many times she replayed the smallest kindness like it was treasure. She had always been easy for the world to hurt, because she never believed she deserved protection, and I had been part of that world. I swallowed hard. "I'm not going anywhere." I finally managed. My voice was quieter than I expected, like the words themselves were fragile. Her eyes lifted, startled, not with happiness, but with disbelief. She searched my face like she was trying to catch the lie hiding between my breaths. She had been let down too many times to trust easily. I didn't blame her. If I had been in her place, I wouldn't trust me either. "Why today?" she whispered. That question cut deeper than anything, because the real answer was something I could never tell her. Because you'll die one day, and I wasn't there for you. Because I knew the future, and I couldn't let it repeat. Because losing you once was enough to haunt a lifetime. But those weren't answers she was meant to hear. Those belonged to a version of me she would never meet. So I gave her the only truth that wouldn't break her. Because I should have stayed the first time. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. She didn't understand what I meant, but she felt the sincerity in my words. Her shoulders loosened a little, like some invisible weight had slipped off just for a moment. It was the smallest change, but for her, small meant everything. As we walked down the hallway together, I noticed the stares. People looked at her like she was an easy punchline. Looked at me like I had stepped into a role no one wanted. The same boys who used to shove her books aside eyed us with that mocking curiosity, the kind that always precedes cruelty. And for the first time, I understood how dangerous indifference was. The first time around, I had ignored these small things. I had told myself they weren't my problem, that everyone goes through something, that she would figure it out. But she never got the chance to figure it out, not when the world kept cutting at her until she broke. This time, I wouldn't let them break her. When someone bumped her shoulder a little too hard, she immediately whispered, "Sorry," even though it wasn't her fault. That one word stabbed through me. Her instinct to apologize for existing was louder than her instinct to defend herself. I stepped closer to her without thinking, creating a quiet space around her, a shield she didn't know she had a right to. She looked up at me, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said softly, "but I want to." And for the first time in both timelines, she smiled. Not fully, not brightly, but enough to tell me that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. The day felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because every step we took together reminded me of the dozen choices I had gotten wrong the first time. She walked beside me with those small, careful steps, like she was afraid her existence might disturb the world around her. I noticed how she kept her hands tucked inside her sleeves, fingers fidgeting nervously, as if she was constantly apologizing to the air itself. I remembered the old timeline too well. How she used to walk alone, how people brushed past her like she didn't belong in the same world as them. And now that I was beside her, I realized something painful. I had watched that happen before. I had seen her get swallowed by silence, by loneliness, by cruelty, and I had never stepped in. Maybe I thought it wasn't my place. Maybe I didn't know what she was going through. But ignorance was a luxury I didn't have anymore. When we entered the classroom, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The air held that familiar tension, the kind that gathers around the weakest person in the room. She froze for a second in the doorway, her shoulders tightening. I could almost hear her thoughts. Don't draw attention. Don't make a sound. just blend in, just survive. She had lived her life like that, surviving, not living. I walked in first, just slightly, giving her space to breathe without being the center of the room's eyes. Even so, a few whispers rose like smoke. That's her. Why is he with her? Since when? Their voices were low, but not low enough. She dropped her gaze immediately, clutching her books tighter. And something inside me snapped a little. She moved to her usual seat, last row, corner, the safest place for someone who doesn't want to exist too loudly. I followed her there and sat beside her. The entire class seemed to freeze. This wasn't normal. Not in the previous timeline. Not in any timeline. The old me never even realized where she sat. I was too busy fitting in with a world that didn't deserve the version of me I pretended to be. You don't have to sit here, she whispered, eyes fixed on her desk. I know, I said gently. I want to. She fidgeted with her sleeves again, clearly overwhelmed. She wasn't used to someone choosing her. And I realized then that the saddest part wasn't that people mistreated her. It was that she had learned to expect mistreatment as normal. The teacher walked in, and the class settled down, but I could still feel eyes on her. On us. She sat stiff, trying to make herself small, as if shrinking would save her. I could sense her fear, not dramatic, not loud, but quiet and constant, a fear that had lived inside her for years. Halfway through the lesson, a folded piece of paper slid across her desk. She froze, hands trembling. I knew that look. Notes passed to her were never kind. Without letting her touch it, I picked it up before she could. Inside was a drawing, cruel, mocking, aimed at her. The kind of thing that had chipped away at her self-worth day by day. Her eyes widened as I slowly crumpled the paper in my hand. You don't have to, she whispered, panic flickering across her face. I'm not letting them do this to you, I said firmly. She looked at me like no one had ever said those words to her, not with that certainty. Like she couldn't decide if I was real or just a dream she accidentally stepped into. The boy who threw the note was watching us, waiting for a reaction. I met his stare. Not angrily, not dramatically, but with a steady look that told him things wouldn't go the way they used to. He looked away first. She stared at me, stunned. Why are you doing this? Her voice cracked in the slightest, most fragile way. How could I explain the truth? That I had lived a life where she didn't exist anymore? That I had found out too late how tightly her kindness had stitched itself to my heart? That her death had felt like punishment for every time I ignored the pain in her eyes? So I told her the part she could handle, because no one should face this alone. She blinked hard, as if fighting tears she didn't want anyone to see. She wasn't used to protection. She wasn't used to someone choosing her side without asking for anything in return. And I realized this wasn't just about stopping her from dying in the future. It was about teaching her, slowly, painfully, gently, that she deserved to be alive. Class ended. She gathered her books with the same careful movements, still shaken. When we stepped out into the hallway, she hesitated. You really stayed, she whispered, barely audible. I told you I would. A soft breath escaped her lips, almost like a quiet sigh of relief. For the first time, she didn't walk ahead of me or fall behind. She walked beside me, small, hesitant steps, but steps in the same direction. And in that tiny, delicate moment, I felt something shift in the universe. A thread that had snapped in the old timeline was beginning to mend. The rest of the day unfolded with a strange mixture of familiarity and wrongness. Familiar because I had lived these moments once, wrong because this time I wasn't a silent witness. I kept watching her from the corner of my eye, not to monitor her, but to understand her, truly understand the small, fragile movements she used to hide her pain. At lunch, she walked with her head lowered, gripping her lunchbox like it was a shield. I remembered this scene too well. In the old timeline, she would sit alone at the far end of the cafeteria, pretending to be busy with her food, so no one would notice the loneliness sitting beside her. But this time, I wasn't going to let her sit alone. She hesitated at the cafeteria doorway, like stepping inside was an invitation for cruelty. The noise, the laughter, the clatter of trays, all of it overwhelmed her senses. She looked up at me, uncertainty written in her eyes. You don't have to. I'm not letting you eat alone, I said gently. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a heroic moment. But for her, it meant everything. I could see that in the way her breathing changed, in the way she bit her lower lip, like she was trying to stop herself from getting her hopes up. She wasn't someone who trusted easily. She wasn't someone who believed kindness lasted longer than a day. People like her learned too early that kindness usually comes with an expiration date. We chose a corner table. Not hidden, not in the center, but somewhere she wouldn't feel trapped. I noticed she opened her lunchbox slowly, cautiously, like she was waiting for someone to laugh at its contents. "This is nice," I said softly, just to ease her tension. She blinked at me, surprised. "It's just simple food." "Simple is good," I said. "Simple means made with care." She froze for half a second, then looked down quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Compliments weren't something she knew how to receive. Not about herself. Not about anything related to her. As we ate, the whispers began again. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut if you weren't careful. Why is he talking to her? Did he lose a bet? She's such a weirdo. Her fingers tightened around her fork. I saw that flicker of panic, the urge to apologize for existing, the instinct to shrink, to disappear. Not this time. I leaned a little closer, not making it obvious, but enough that she felt the shield of presence around her. "Don't listen to them," I murmured. She shook her head slightly. "You shouldn't sit with me. They'll start saying things about you, too." "Let them," I said. "I don't care." She looked at me like she couldn't understand how those words were even possible, like she was trying to rewrite her entire understanding of me in real time. After a few minutes, her shoulders relaxed just a little. I watched as she took a bite of her food, small and careful, as if she was testing the air for judgment. When none came from me, she ate again, more comfortably this time. It was such a small thing, but I realized small acts of safety were miracles for someone who lived in fear. She glanced at me shyly. "You're really different today." "I guess I finally figured out what matters," I said. She didn't ask what that meant. Maybe she didn't think she had the right to ask. That was something I had to change too. Slowly, gently. She deserved to ask questions, to take space, to exist without fear. Lunch ended, and as we walked out of the cafeteria, one of the boys from earlier deliberately bumped into her. Hard. She stumbled, barely catching herself, and her food container nearly slipped from her hands. "Watch where you're going," he said with a sneer. Omi would have ignored it. Told myself it wasn't my fight. Told myself she would be fine. But I remembered the old timeline. She wasn't fine. She never had been. I stepped forward before she could shrink and whisper another apology. "You bumped into her," I said, voice calm but firm. The boy scoffed. "Why do you care?" "Because she matters," I said. No hesitation. She stared at me like I had just said something impossible. The boy rolled his eyes and walked away, muttering something under his breath. I didn't care. What mattered was a tiny, trembling breath she exhaled, like she had been holding it her entire life. "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," I said, the word soft, "but I want to." We walked together again, and this time she didn't walk 2 steps behind me. She didn't try to make herself invisible. She walked beside me. Small steps, hesitant steps, but brave ones. As the day neared its end, we reached the school gates. She stopped there, clutching her books close. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with something dangerously close to hope. I smiled softly. "I told you, I'm not leaving." And for a brief moment, fleeting, gentle, so fragile it could break, she smiled back. A real smile, small but real. And I knew this was the first moment I'd truly rewritten. The first moment the future wasn't repeating itself. The walk home felt like stepping into a memory I had forgotten to cherish. The sky was dipped in soft orange, the kind of sunset that looks gentle even when the world around it isn't. She walked beside me with those same small, cautious steps, as if every inch she moved forward came a question she was too afraid to ask. I could tell she wasn't used to someone walking her home. In the previous timeline, she always walked alone, even when it rained, even when she cried, even when her world felt like it was collapsing around her. No one noticed. No one cared. And back then, I was one of those no one s. But now, every step she took mattered to me in a way I couldn't put into words. At first, she didn't say anything. She kept her gaze glued to the sidewalk, hiding behind her sleeves like they were a pair of soft shields. The silence wasn't awkward. It was delicate, fragile, the kind of silence that builds itself around someone who has spent too long being afraid to speak. "Are you sure you don't mind walking?" she asked finally, voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't be here if I minded," I replied. She hesitated, then nodded slightly, as if still expecting the moment to break, as if still waiting for me to say, "Just kidding," and walk away like everyone else had. And I realized something painful. She lived every moment preparing for disappointment. It was her default expectation, her emotional armor. As we passed a small convenience store, she paused. Can you wait a second? I need to get something." I nodded. She walked inside quickly, almost nervously, like she was afraid of being watched. She returned with a small pack of bandages. At first, I didn't understand. Then she held out one of the bandages with a faint, embarrassed expression. "For yesterday." I blinked. I hadn't even realized until that moment that I had a small cut on my hand from gripping the crumpled paper too tightly in class. The cut had barely stung. But the fact that she noticed, it hit me harder than any wound. "You didn't have to." "I know," she cut in softly. "But I wanted to." The same words I had told her earlier. And hearing her say them, it did something strange and warmed my chest. I held out my hand, and she gently pressed a bandage on, her touch feather-light. She worked slowly, carefully, almost reverently, as if my hand were something delicate, or maybe she was just afraid of hurting me. When she finished, she pulled her hands back quickly, as if she had crossed some invisible boundary. "Thank you," I said quietly. She shook her head, a shy smile peeking out, tiny but real. You helped me today. This is nothing." Nothing. She genuinely thought this small act was nothing. But kindness from someone who had been treated like she didn't matter, that wasn't nothing. That was everything. We continued walking, and after a few minutes, she spoke again. "Can I ask something?" she said cautiously, as if expecting permission to be denied. "Of course." Why bother with me?" She wasn't accusing me. She wasn't angry. She was genuinely confused, like kindness toward her didn't make sense. I stopped walking and turned to her. She froze, startled by the sudden halt. "Because you deserve better than the world gave you," I said softly. And I didn't see that before. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened, shimmering, not with tears, but with something more fragile than tears. A kind of shock, a kind of disbelief, like she was hearing a language she had never learned. "No one's ever said that to me," she whispered. "I should have," I replied. She shook her head lightly, her hair swaying. "No. People don't say things like that to people like me. People like me." The phrase hit me like a blade. People like her, quiet, gentle, invisible to a loud world, are always the ones who carry the heaviest hurt. They are the first ones to be overlooked and the last ones to be protected. We resumed walking, and after a few minutes, she glanced at me again, her voice trembling. "If you ever get tired of being around me, you can tell me. I won't be upset." My heart tightened painfully. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was bracing herself for abandonment, the way some kids brace for storms they've learned will come anyway. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. She looked like she wanted to believe me, like believing would make the earth under her feet a little less shaky. But trust takes more than words. It takes time. And I had been given time. Time I wasn't going to waste again. When we reached the street near her house, she slowed down. Her home wasn't big or fancy. It looked quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of place where silence collects like dust. "This is me," she said softly. I nodded. "I'll walk you the rest of the way." She shook her head quickly. "No, it's okay. You've already done so much. I don't measure kindness. I replied, I choose it. She looked at me for a long moment, longer than she ever had, like she was memorizing the moment, or testing it, or trying to understand why someone like me would stand at her side. Thank you, she whispered again. She said it like a prayer, like gratitude was the only emotion she had permission to show. And as she walked the final few steps to her door, I realized something heavy. She wasn't just someone I wanted to save because I knew her ending. She was someone I wished I had saved even when I didn't. The morning after the confrontation felt heavier than any morning should. The sky was dim, wrapped in a soft gray light that made everything seem muted, as if the world was holding its breath. I woke up with her voice echoing in my mind. Not the desperate cry from the rooftop in her first life, not the trembling whisper asking me to stay in the hallway, but the quiet, steady tone she had used when she told me the truth of her death. I just wanted someone to choose me for once. That sentence looped in my head like a punishment I deserved. I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, trying to steady the tremble in my breathing. But no matter how hard I tried, the ache in my chest wouldn't lessen. It felt like mourning someone who was still alive, someone who woke up every morning replaying memories no one else remembered. School felt different. When I walked through corridors, the noise didn't hit me the way it usually did. Instead, everything seemed distant, blurred, as if I wasn't fully present in my own life. Students brushed past me, laughing, talking, living in a world untouched by second chances. I kept looking for her. It wasn't even intentional. My eyes simply searched for the small figure who always tried to make her presence look smaller than it was. I found her near the windows in the upper hallway, where sunlight leaked through the glass, turning her hair into a soft halo. She was alone, leaning against a rail, breath held tight in her chest. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept her back straight, as if she was afraid that relaxing even a little would cause everything inside her to fall apart. I walked toward her without thinking. It wasn't courage, nor was it guilt. It was something quieter, an unexplainable pull, the same pull I ignored that day she begged me to stay. She didn't notice me until I was close enough for her shadow to overlap with mine. When she turned her head, her eyes flickered with surprise, followed by a quick instinctive fear, the kind that came from living a life where every approach felt like an attack. But instead of stepping back, she stood still. Her fingers gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles turned pale. "Did you sleep?" I asked quietly, a useless question. She hadn't, not with everything she had confessed. But I needed to say something, anything, that wouldn't shatter her all over again. "Not much," she whispered. The silence between us stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. For once, she wasn't trying to apologize for existing, and I wasn't pretending not to notice her pain. There was something unfamiliar yet strangely natural about this. Standing with her, sharing a breath of quiet that didn't require pretending. Even though she avoided my eyes, I could see the way her shoulders lowered slightly, how her grip on the railing eased as if some invisible weight had lifted. "I thought a lot about what you said." I continued, choosing each word carefully. "About your death, your old life." She stiffened, and I immediately regretted saying it so bluntly. But then, slowly, she exhaled. A long, trembling breath. "I didn't want to tell you," she admitted. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I trusted you too much. I was afraid you'd look at me differently. Pity me?" Her voice cracked, and she looked down at her shoes. "I don't want pity. I just want to live this time. Properly." "You're not asking for anything wrong," I said. She shook her head lightly. "Maybe it's still wrong to hope for kindness." My heart twisted. How long had she lived like this? How many days had she spent believing she deserved to be stepped on, ignored, abandoned? She wasn't asking for love. She wasn't asking for devotion. She wasn't even asking for revenge. All she wanted was a life where she didn't have to earn the right to exist. "You don't have to hope," I said quietly. "Not anymore." She finally looked at me, really looked. Her eyes were wide, vulnerable. But behind that vulnerability was something fragile and bright, a flicker of belief she was scared to let grow. I saw the reflection of my own guilt, my own regret, and something else I wasn't ready to name yet. A loud burst of laughter erupted from a group of students walking past us. But she didn't flinch this time. She stayed where she was, gaze steady on mine. It felt like the world paused. Just for us, just for this moment. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered, "or why you're being kind now. But thank you. Even if this is temporary, thank you." "It's not temporary," I said immediately. "Not anymore." Her eyes widened again, not with fear. This time with kind of soft disbelief, as if I'd handed her something too precious to accept. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The quiet between us grew warm instead of heavy. And in that warmth, in that fragile stillness, something inside me finally settled. This time, I wouldn't walk away. The days that followed were quiet but transformative, almost imperceptibly so. Every morning, I watched her arrive at school, the small stiffness in her shoulders slowly softening with each passing day. She still flinched when someone bumped her accidentally, still murmured sorry for the smallest things, but now there was a subtle shift in her posture, like she was learning that she didn't always have to shrink to fit the world. And I walked beside her, step for step, not as a savior, not as someone to shield her from every cruelty, but simply as a presence she could rely on. Presence mattered more than protection sometimes. Presence meant she could finally believe that maybe, just maybe, someone would stay. She began to speak a little more freely, first in whispers, then in sentences that grew longer and braver each day. I watched as she laughed quietly when something funny happened. The sound so delicate and tentative, it felt like a secret the universe had finally allowed her to share. And when the first truly genuine laugh escaped her lips, I realized how much I had missed in the old timeline, how much of her life I had never truly seen, because I was too blind to notice. The girl who had once been invisible was beginning to unfold like a flower, her petals catching the light she had always feared to touch. And there were moments, small ones, that carried enormous weight. She would glance at me mid-class, our eyes meeting for a fraction of a second before she quickly looked away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Or she would walk faster, catch up with me on the stairs, muttering something about needing help carrying her books, her voice laced with the kind of awkwardness that made the heart ache. I caught those moments, savored them, not for romantic reasons, not yet, but because they were proof that she trusted me, that she was letting someone into the safe space she had kept locked for so long. Every smile, every tentative gesture, every soft word was a quiet rebellion against a version of her that had died without ever being seen. We weren't perfect. Some days, she would retreat into herself, clenching her fists, biting her lip, eyes clouded with the same fear that had haunted her first life. And some days, I would falter, haunted by memories of the moments I had once missed, the times I had walked away, leaving her to face everything alone. But slowly, gradually, those days became fewer. Our silences became comfortable, our conversations longer, our shared walks through the hallways a subtle defiance of the cruelty and apathy that had once surrounded her. I began to see the world not just through my eyes, but through hers, the fragile, sensitive lens of someone who had survived too much, who had loved too much, who had almost given up on existing entirely. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft shades of rose and gold, we sat on the steps outside the school, sharing the quiet. She had her sketchbook open, doodling aimlessly, and I watched her fingers glide over the page, hesitant yet determined. I realized then that this was what living fully meant for her. Moments that were hers, uninterrupted, unjudged, untainted by the shadows of the past. And I felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude that she had been given another chance, and that I had been given the chance to finally honor it. Eventually, she spoke without hesitation, voice calm and steady. I don't think I ever believed someone could really choose me before. There was no bitterness in her tone, no sadness, only quiet astonishment. I mean, really choose me, not just out of obligation or guilt. You actually stayed. I smiled, the corners of my mouth tight with emotion I had kept buried too long. I promised, I said softly, and I always will. She looked at me, a mixture of wonder and tentative hope in her eyes, and I knew she believed me this time. I didn't need to prove anything. The weight of her trust was enough. As the weeks turned into months, she grew stronger. She laughed more freely. She spoke more openly. She let herself be seen, not just by me, but by the world she had once thought would never notice her. And through it all, I stayed. I didn't walk away, didn't falter, didn't hesitate, because I had been given the rarest gift, an opportunity to rewrite history, to give her what she had deserved from the start. And more than that, I had been given a chance to finally live with the knowledge that sometimes redemption isn't loud or grand. It's quiet, persistent, patient. It's walking beside someone until they learn that the world doesn't have to be cruel. And so we continued, day by day, step by step. I never took for granted the small glances she gave me, the brief smiles, the moments of tentative connection that were once impossible. I understood, more deeply than ever, that love and loyalty were not defined by grand gestures or heroic acts, but by the quiet insistence of showing up again and again when it mattered most. The girl who had once died for a crush now lived fully, and I was there not as a savior, not as a hero, but as someone who had finally learned the meaning of choosing to stay. Because sometimes life doesn't give you a second chance lightly, and when it does, the right thing isn't just to witness it. The right thing is to be present, to protect what matters quietly, steadfastly, and endlessly. And I would do that for her for as long as she let me. For the first time, both of us were free to truly live.